She was still alive. That was the thing that didn't make sense. The patrol car was half underwater in a Louisiana marsh canal on a cold November night, and there was someone inside it. Bound to the seat, barely conscious, surrounded by rising black water that had already reached her chin. The local authorities had already logged it as an accident, a vehicle that slid off the road. Nobody inside. Case closed. But Rex wouldn't stop barking at the water. And FBI field officer Ethan Cole had learned a long time ago that when Rex barked at something everyone else had already dismissed, the thing everyone else had dismissed was the only thing that mattered. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and stay with me all the way to the end. Because what this dog pulls from the bottom of that canal changes everything for everyone involved. The call had come in at 9:47 as a radio malfunction. That was the official characterization from the Callaway Parish dispatch log. Radio malfunction. Possible unit off route. No further details. No follow-up required. The kind of entry that disappeared into a system's noise without generating any subsequent action because it had been designed to disappear. Someone who knew how dispatch logs worked had written that entry. Someone who understood which language produced paperwork and which language produced investigations. Ethan Cole was 25 years old and had been with the FBI's Gulf Coast Field Division for 14 months, assigned to a rural coverage area that stretched along the coastal marshland for 60 miles in either direction from his base station. He had the particular undramatic competence of someone who had been good at things since early on and had channeled that capacity into work that didn't get recognition, because recognition required witnesses. He had been driving Route 7, heading back from an interview, when the dispatch entry rolled across his secondary channel. He almost didn't stop. Rex stopped him. The German Shepherd had been in the back seat for 3 hours. Tan, gold, and black coat, 4 years old, trained for tracking and evidence detection at a facility in Virginia that graduated 8 dogs a year. He had been in a relaxed, dozing posture for the last 40 minutes, and then, with no warning and no obvious stimulus, he went completely alert. Ears forward, body rigid, nose working the air through the cracked window with the rapid, focused efficiency of an instrument that had locked onto something real. Ethan knew that change. He had seen it 11 times in 14 months, in situations ranging from a buried weapons cache in a farm field to a man hiding inside a ceiling in a building Ethan had been told was empty. He had learned to treat it as the most reliable data point in any situation. Not infallible, but more reliable than most things that came with credentials attached. He slowed the vehicle. Rex's nose was angled left, toward the marsh. Ethan pulled to the shoulder and got out. The canal was 40 feet from the road, accessible by a gravel service track that maintenance crews used during dry season. The water in November was high. 2 weeks of coastal rain had pushed everything in Callaway Parish above normal levels, and the canal that ran parallel to Route 7 for this stretch was running dark and fast, and about 3 feet above where it sat in September. Rex was out of the vehicle before Ethan had finished registering why they were stopped. The dog moved down the service track without hesitation, and Ethan followed with his flashlight up and his hand already reaching for his radio. The patrol car was at 30-degree angle, nose down, in the canal, the rear third still above the waterline. The vehicle's markings were Callaway Parish Sheriff's Department. The emergency lights were off. The water around it was settling, not freshly disturbed, but not long settled either. Maybe 20 minutes in the water, maybe 30. Ethan swept his light across the vehicle and felt everything in his body go cold. Movement inside the rear window, barely visible. A hand, flat against the glass, palm out, the specific motion of someone who could no longer lift their arm properly, but was using the last available muscle to communicate a single, complete message. I'm here. Rex, hold, Ethan said. He was already moving toward the water. The canal was cold in the way that Louisiana water in November is cold. Not the ice water cold of northern states, but the specific, penetrating cold of water that had been absorbing November nights for 2 weeks and had run out of warmth. He went into his waist at the bank, and then to his chest as the grade dropped, and he pushed toward the vehicle with the specific, focused urgency of someone who had done water training and was now doing water reality, which were different in the way that every trained thing is different from its application. He reached the rear door in 12 seconds. The water was at the bottom of the rear window. Inside the car, the water level was at chest height on the person in the back seat. A young woman, her hands bound behind her with plastic flex cuffs, her head tilted back to keep her face above the rising line, her eyes open and tracking him with a specific, determined consciousness of someone who is refusing to stop functioning. I'm FBI, Ethan said through the glass. I'm getting you out. She said something. He couldn't hear it through the glass and the water and the rushing of the canal, but he could read the shape of it. Hurry. He tried the door. Locked. He tried the handle twice. Automatic. Locked from the front. Sealed. He went for his tire iron. Rex had followed him into the water. The dog was swimming alongside the vehicle with a focused, purposeful movement of an animal who had not received an instruction about what specifically to do, but had assessed the situation and arrived at a contribution. He was at the broken seal where the rear window met the doorframe, his nose working the gap, and he was making a sound, not barking, not whining, but the specific, low, continuous sound of an animal communicating urgency to its partner. Ethan understood it. He swung the tire iron at the rear window. The glass spider-webbed. He hit it again, and it gave. Not cleanly. Safety glass doing what safety glass does, holding its shape in 1,000 pieces. And he cleared the frame with his forearm, and the water poured through in both directions as the pressure equalized. He got his hands through the window frame. Can you hear me? She turned her head, her eyes focused on him with the sharp, deliberate attention of someone fighting through a significant amount of physiological stress to stay cognitively present. Yes, she said. Her voice was hoarse and compressed and entirely without panic. Hands. Behind my back. I can't. I see them. He reached through the window. She was positioned wrong. The flex cuffs were behind her back and she was facing him, which meant he needed to get her turned or get the cuffs cut before he could get her through the window. He reached for his knife. The water in the vehicle was still rising. The nose-down angle was working against him. Physics pulling everything forward and down. What's your name? He asked. He asked it because he needed to keep her conscious, and because she had the look of someone who might slip under if she lost the thread of the moment. Aria, she said. Aria Morgan. Okay, Aria. I'm Ethan. I'm going to cut the restraints. Don't pull until I tell you. Copy, she said. The word landed differently than any other word she had said. Not civilian different. Something specific in the way she received an instruction and confirmed it. The compact, automatic acknowledgement of someone for whom that exchange was professional language. He cut the flex cuffs in one motion. Her arms came around with a jerky, partially unresponsive movement of limbs that had been bound behind her for long enough that the circulation was significantly impaired. She made a sound that she controlled immediately. The brief, involuntary expression of pain that trained people suppress as fast as it appears. Through the window, he said. Head first. I'll guide you. She moved toward the window. Rex had his teeth in the collar of her jacket. Not pulling, just holding. The specific grip of a dog who understood that his job in this moment was to be an anchor, rather than a tractor. Ethan got her shoulders through the frame. Her upper body cleared the window, and then her weight shifted, and she was in the water, and his arms were under hers, and they were moving toward the bank, with Rex swimming tight beside them. She was conscious the whole way. That was the thing he kept noting, even in the middle of the motion and the cold and the urgency. She was conscious. She was tracking. She was even helping, kicking with legs that clearly didn't have full feeling yet. She was doing everything her body could do to participate in her own rescue. They reached the bank. He got her onto the grass, and she sat up without assistance, which told him something important. She was cold and injured, and her circulation was coming back with the specific agony of returning blood supply. But she was not broken. She was present. Rex shook himself and pressed against her immediately, the way he pressed against people whose body temperature needed assistance. And she put one hand on the dog's back and held it there. Ethan was on his radio. "This is Cole, FBI, Gulf Coast. I have a survivor recovered from a submerged vehicle at Route 7, mile marker 42. I need EMS, and I need another field unit. Now." Dispatch acknowledged. He looked at the woman sitting on the canal bank with his dog pressed against her side, and his mind was already doing the accounting that the situation required. Callaway Parish Patrol Vehicle. Dispatch log listed as radio malfunction. No follow-up. A woman bound with flex cuffs in the back seat. Flex cuffs. Not standard police restraints. Flex cuffs were what people used when they were doing something improvised. Something they didn't want documented in an equipment log. "Aria." He crouched in front of her. "Can you tell me what happened?" She looked at him. Her eyes were clear and direct, and doing the same assessment of him that he had been doing of her. The rapid professional read of someone determining whether the person across from them was safe before deciding what information to release. She made her decision in about 4 seconds. "I'm Navy," she said. "SEAL program. I was on a training rotation out of the New Orleans Naval Facility. I've been here 3 days. She held his gaze. "What I was doing here tonight was not training." "What were you doing?" "Following a lead," she said. "On a trafficking route that runs through 3 parishes, using law enforcement checkpoints as cover." She paused. The canal water was dripping from her hair, and her face was going from the pale of hypothermia toward the pink of returning circulation. And she looked, despite everything, like someone who was furious rather than frightened. "I got close enough to a specific checkpoint to identify the primary handler. And then I got picked up." "Picked up," Ethan said. "By who?" "2 deputies," she said. "Callaway Parish." She held his gaze. "They told me I had entered a restricted area. Put me in the back of a cruiser. I knew within 4 minutes it wasn't a real arrest. The paperwork was wrong. The radio silence was deliberate, and they drove away from the direction of any facility." She paused. "I tried to get my hands to my secondary radio before they cuffed me. I didn't make it in time." Ethan was very still. "They staged the crash," he said. "They drove the car to the canal and pushed it in," she said. "With me in it. Bound." She said it with the flat, precise delivery of someone reporting facts, rather than processing them, because the processing had already happened somewhere in the back of the patrol car while the water was rising. "They assumed I'd go under before anyone found the vehicle." She looked at the canal. "What they didn't account for was your dog." Ethan looked at Rex. The dog had been doing the thing he did at crime scenes, moving back toward the water. Not dramatically, just persistently, the way he moved when he had identified something and hadn't finished with it. He was at the edge of the bank, nose down, the particular focused quality of his attention pulling him toward the submerged vehicle rather than away from it. "Rex," Ethan said. The dog looked at him, then back at the water. "He smells something," Ethan said. "He smells the vehicle," Aria said. which is 3 feet underwater. She watched the dog. What's his specialty? Evidence detection, Ethan said. Tracking and evidence. Something moved in her expression, not surprise, but recognition. Something in that vehicle, she said. It wasn't a question. He's telling me yes, Ethan said. She looked at the canal, then at Ethan, and in her eyes was the expression of someone who had been in the water 20 minutes ago, being held above a rising line by the last available muscle in her arms, and who was now looking at a German shepherd that had found something in the vehicle she had been left to die in. "How good is he?" she asked. "Better than anything else I've worked with," Ethan said. She nodded once, the nod of a person integrating information. Headlights appeared on Route 7, above the canal. 2 vehicles, coming from the north. Rex turned from the water. He looked at the headlights, and he began to growl. Low, continuous. The growl he made when something arriving was something he had already assessed and categorized, and the category was not the one you wanted it to be. Ethan's hand moved to his weapon. He looked at Arya. She was already moving, getting to her feet with the urgent, impaired movement of a woman whose legs were still coming back to her, but who had decided that being upright was more important than being comfortable. "How many people did you tell about this call?" she asked. "My field dispatch," he said. "Standard protocol." "Is your field dispatch shared with local departments?" He looked at the headlights. The accounting completed itself in approximately 2 seconds. "Yes," he said. She looked at him with those clear, direct eyes. "Then we have maybe 60 seconds before this gets significantly more complicated." Rex was still growling, and the headlights were still coming. 60 seconds was optimistic. The vehicles came down the service track in 45, moving faster than the gravel justified, the kind of speed that communicated urgency of a specific and non-helpful variety. 2 Callaway Parish Sheriff's units, their light bars dark, no sirens, which was the detail that told Ethan everything he needed to know about the nature of their arrival. Official response came with lights. This came without them. Arya had gotten to her feet. She was standing with her weight distributed in the deliberate, careful way of someone whose legs were operating at 60% and who was managing that deficit by being precise about every movement. She was soaked and her core temperature was still coming back, and she looked like someone who had been left to drown 20 minutes ago, which she had. And she was standing up straight and her eyes were completely clear. "Behind me," Ethan said. "I'm good," she said. "I know you're good. Get behind me anyway." She moved 1 step to his left and slightly behind, which was a compromise he recognized as the best he was going to get from a person with her training and her specific relationship to the last 45 minutes of her life. Rex was in front of both of them. The dog had stopped growling. That was the thing that registered. The growl had stopped, replaced by the specific silence of an animal that has moved past the warning stage into something more considered. He was sitting, perfectly still, in the space between Ethan and the approaching vehicles, with his eyes fixed on the doors as they opened. 2 deputies stepped out of the first vehicle. Ethan ran the quick assessment. Both male, 40s, the specific physical quality of men who had spent 20 years doing law enforcement work in a rural parish, where most of what presented itself was not the kind of thing that required speed or precision. They moved with the confident looseness of people who believed this scene was going to be managed by the authority their uniforms represented. That confidence told him they didn't know he was FBI yet. They thought they were responding to a local report of a vehicle in the canal. They thought what they would find was a situation they could control with the right language. "Evening," the first deputy said. His name tag read Tatum. He looked at Ethan, at Arya, at Rex. His eyes moved to the canal. "We got a call about a vehicle in the water." He said it with the practiced, even delivery of a man running a script. "Y'all see what happened here?" "I pulled the survivor from the vehicle," Ethan said. "FBI Field Agent Ethan Cole, Gulf Coast Division." He kept his voice factual. "This woman was bound in the rear seat. The vehicle appears to have been intentionally placed in the canal." The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. The second deputy, name tag Cruz, looked at Arya. Something moved in his face, fast and small, and managed almost immediately. Almost. Rex saw it. His head turned to Cruz and stayed there. "Bound?" Tatum said. He said it with the specific quality of performance that good liars bring to words they already know the meaning of. "That's a serious claim, Agent Cole," Ethan said. "And it's not a claim. I have the flex cuffs. They're on the bank." He kept his eyes on both of them equally, the way his training had taught him to manage multiple subjects. Wide focus, peripheral tracking, no fixed attention that gave one person an unmonitored window. "This is now an FBI scene. I need both of you to stay at your vehicles while I wait for my backup." Tatum looked at Cruz. The look lasted half a second. It was not the look of officers coordinating on procedure. It was the look of people who have a shared problem and are rapidly assessing whether the problem has become unmanageable. Cruz spoke for the first time. His voice was lower than Tatum's and had a different quality. Less performance, more the flat, measured tone of someone who is running actual calculations. "She's a Navy operative who entered a restricted zone without authorization tonight. We responded to a report of a suspicious individual at a restricted checkpoint. This is a law enforcement matter, not a federal one." Arya said nothing. Ethan looked at Cruz. "Walk me through the restricted zone." "What?" "The restricted zone she allegedly entered. What is it? Who designated it? When was the designation filed? And with which authority?" He held Cruz's gaze with the patient, unblinking attention of someone who had asked a question he already knew the answer to. "Take your time." Cruz's jaw tightened. Rex stood up. The dog moved 3 steps forward and stopped. He was not threatening in any posture or manner. Ears forward but not back. No sound, no visible aggression. He was simply occupying a position that made the geometry of the scene different than it had been. And the geometry change communicated something to Tatum and Cruz that no spoken word could have conveyed with the same precision. "We are not afraid of you." Arya had shifted beside Ethan. She was looking at Cruz with the specific, cataloging attention of someone who was matching a face to information she had gathered. Ethan saw her eyes change, the slight narrowing of recognition. "You were at the checkpoint," she said. Cruz looked at her. "Tuesday night," she said, "around midnight. You were running the secondary check on vehicles coming south on Route 12. She said it without accusation, without heat, just fact delivery, the way she said everything. "I was in a civilian vehicle. You looked right at me." "You're confused," Cruz said. "You've been through a traumatic—" "I don't get confused about faces," she said. "It's a specific skill. I've been developing it for 3 years. She looked at Tatum. "You weren't there Tuesday, but you were at the checkpoint on the 14th. That one ran differently. The vehicles going through weren't being checked. They were being waved through. Specific vehicles. Specific plates." Tatum's hand moved toward his belt. Rex moved. He covered the ground between his position and Tatum in 2 seconds. Not at full speed. He didn't need full speed for 2 seconds. And he placed himself directly between Tatum's hand and Ethan, with the complete, decisive commitment of a dog who had made a threat assessment and was implementing a response. Tatum froze. "Don't," Ethan said. His voice was completely level. His weapon was in his hand. He didn't remember drawing it. The motion had been below the threshold of conscious decision. "Hands where I can see them. Both of you. Right now." A long moment. Then Tatum's hands came up. Cruz looked at his partner, then at the dog, then at Ethan's weapon. His hands came up. "This is a mistake," Cruz said. "You don't know what you're—" "Turn around," Ethan said. "Both of you. Face your vehicles." They turned. Ethan's radio was in his left hand. He keyed his field supervisor's direct channel, not the shared dispatch, not the general frequency, the direct encrypted line that bypassed the parish system entirely. "Cole, I need immediate backup at Route 7, Machar 42. 2 Callaway Parish deputies being detained pending investigation. Survivor recovered from a staged vehicle submersion." He paused. "Send the field team, not local coordination. This scene is potentially compromised at the county level." His supervisor's voice came back in 15 seconds. "Copy, Cole. Team is 40 minutes out. Can you hold?" "Holding," Ethan said. He lowered the radio. Aria was beside him, and she said quietly and without drama, 40 minutes is a long time." "I know," he said. "Are there more?" she asked. "More deputies they could call?" "Potentially." He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Tatum and Cruz at their vehicles. "Callaway Parish has 12 officers on rotation. I don't know how many of those 12 are part of whatever this is." "I know how many," she said. He glanced at her briefly. "How?" "Because I've been building a file for 3 weeks," she said. "Why do you think I was at that checkpoint Tuesday?" She kept her voice low and even. "I had names, and I was trying to get movement records to match to patrol logs. I needed one more piece of evidence before I could take it up the chain." She paused. "They found out I was looking before I could get the piece." "How many names?" 4 confirmed, she said. Tatum and Cruz are 2 of them. "The other 2?" "One is a sergeant named Holloway. One, I only have a description. I never got a name. He runs the checkpoint coordination." She held Ethan's gaze for a moment. "If Holloway is on duty tonight, he's going to respond to this location. The shared dispatch call you made when you first found me, he'll have heard it." Ethan processed that quickly. "How long would it take him to get here from the checkpoint?" "Checkpoint's on Route 12, about 12 miles north." She looked at the road above the canal. 20 minutes if he left when the call came in." 20 minutes. His backup was 40 out. He looked at Rex. The dog was still positioned between Ethan and the 2 deputies, monitoring both of them with the methodical, back-and-forth attention of an animal running continuous threat assessment on multiple subjects simultaneously. His ears moved occasionally, picking up sounds from the road, from the water, from the marsh around them. "Rex," Ethan said it quietly. The dog looked at him. "What else is out there?" It was not a command with a response protocol. It was the particular communication between partners that had been refined over 14 months and 43 field operations. An open question delivered in a specific tone that Rex had learned to receive as an invitation to do what he would have done anyway, but with his partner's attention fully directed at what he found. Rex turned toward the canal. He moved to the water's edge and stood there, his nose working the air coming off the surface, his body in the specific configuration of an animal that was reading depth rather than breadth, trying to detect something below the surface rather than across it. "He smells the vehicle," Aria said. She was watching Rex with an intensity that was different from how she had been watching the deputies. This was the attention of someone who was adding up information. "He was trying to get back to it even when we were on the bank," Ethan said. "Before Tatum and Cruz arrived. He was pulling back toward the water." Aria looked at the canal, the dark surface, the disturbed silt that marked where the patrol car had gone under. "There's something in that vehicle," she said. It wasn't a question. Rex thinks so. Rex is right, she said. And then, after a pause that carried the weight of something she was deciding to share, I had a military data drive with me tonight. Waterproof housing. Surveillance files I had compiled over 3 weeks. Checkpoint logs, vehicle records, photographs, identification matches. She looked at Ethan. When they grabbed me, they took my phone and my field radio. They checked my pockets. They didn't find the drive because I had it secured in a compartment inside my boot. Where is it now? My boot came off in the car, she said, when the water came in. I was trying to get to it when you broke the window. She held his gaze. The drive is in that patrol car, 3 feet underwater. Rex was already at the edge. The dog looked back at Ethan with a specific, communicative look that said, I know. I've known since we got here. Are we doing this or not? He can smell it from here? Arya asked. He can smell it through water, Ethan said. Evidence detection training includes submerged material. The compound in the waterproof housing. He's been trained on that specific material. She stared at him, then at the dog. Something moved across her face that was not quite surprise and not quite admiration, but lived in the space between them where things that are exactly right tend to arrive. Can he retrieve it? She asked. I don't know, Ethan said honestly. He's never done it in a submerged vehicle. He looked at the canal. But he goes where the evidence is. That's not training anymore. That's just who he is. If Holloway gets here before your backup, and that drive is still in the car, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They both understood what the drive meant. 3 weeks of evidence, names and vehicle records and checkpoint surveillance. Everything that connected the route to the officers and the officers to the trafficking operation. If that drive stayed in the canal until someone with a vested interest in its disappearance had access to the scene. The water was cold and dark and 3 feet deep over the roof of the patrol car. Rex was at the edge, reading the surface, his whole body communicating the same thing it had been communicating since they arrived. Rex, Ethan said. The dog looked at him. Ethan crouched to his level, looked at him directly, used the hand signal, flat palm, 2 fingers pointed down, the retrieve command extended to an unusual context. Then he pointed at the water. Rex looked at the water, looked at Ethan. Then he went in. Tatum made a sound, a short, involuntary sound of a man watching something happen that he cannot stop and does not want to happen. Ethan looked at him sharply. Don't move, Ethan said. Tatum was very still. The canal surface was disturbed where Rex had entered, a ring of movement, the specific pattern of a purposeful animal diving rather than falling. The dark water was opaque beyond 18 inches, and Ethan couldn't track him visually. He counted. 10 seconds. 15. Arya was counting beside him. He could feel it in the quality of her stillness, the controlled, breath-managed waiting of someone who was doing the same arithmetic. 20 seconds. 25. Rex surfaced. He came up at the bank 2 feet to the left of where he had entered, and he was carrying something in his mouth. And Ethan was there before the dog had finished shaking the water from his face. The object was rectangular, 4 inches by 2, matte black casing with a reinforced gasket around the edge, and the specific density of something that had been built to survive environments that would destroy ordinary electronics. Rex placed it in Ethan's hand and sat down, water streaming from his coat, tail moving twice, the measured, specific twice that meant, found it, did the thing, we good. Arya stepped forward. She looked at the drive in Ethan's hand. She reached for it, then stopped, looked at him. That's your evidence, she said. That's your evidence, he said. Can you confirm it's what you described? She looked at the casing, at the specific gasket pattern on the edge. "Yes," she said. 3 weeks of surveillance files. Names, vehicles, dates, checkpoint coordinates. She looked up at him. Everything needed to prosecute 4 officers and dismantle the route they'd been running for at least 18 months. Tatum had heard every word. Ethan looked at him. Tatum's face had gone through several things in the last 30 seconds and had arrived at something that was specifically and unmistakably fear. "That's inadmissible," Cruz said from beside him. "Chain of custody. A canine evidence recovery from a submerged vehicle is documented, admissible, and happens to be one of the better supported methods of evidence retrieval in federal case law," Ethan said. "Because judges understand that evidence doesn't wait for convenient retrieval conditions." He held the drive up slightly. Rex retrieved it in front of 2 witnesses and a pair of deputies, whose reaction to seeing it recovered is going to be extremely interesting reading in a federal courtroom. Silence. A vehicle appeared on Route 7, headlights coming from the north, moving fast. Rex turned toward the road. He did not growl this time. He made a different sound, a single low note that Ethan had heard twice before in 14 months. The same sound he made outside the building with the man in the ceiling. The same sound he made in the farm field before the weapons cache. Not a warning, an alert. Something coming was worse than what was already here. "Holloway," Arya said quietly. She recognized the arrival the way she had recognized Cruz's face. Not with uncertainty, with the specific certainty of 3 weeks of watching. "That's him." The vehicle came off Route 7 onto the service track, and its headlights swept across all of them. Ethan, Arya, Rex, the 2 deputies with their hands visible, the disturbed canal surface, the scattered flex cuffs on the bank, and took in the entire picture in one illuminated moment. Then the vehicle stopped, sat still for 4 seconds, and then it began reversing back up the service track toward the road. Holloway had seen enough to know the situation had already turned. He was running. Ethan looked at Rex. Rex was already in motion. Rex hit the service track at full speed before Ethan had finished the conscious decision to release him. That was the nature of the partnership. The dog read the moment and moved, and Ethan's job was to trust the read and manage everything else. He trusted it. He had 14 months of evidence that the trust was well placed and 0 incidents where it hadn't been. "Rex, track," he said. Unnecessary. The dog was already tracking. But the command completed the circuit, made it official, told Rex that his partner was present and committed, and the operation was sanctioned and real. Rex disappeared up the service track in the direction of the reversing vehicle. Ethan looked at Tatum and Cruz. The specific and immediate problem of 2 potentially armed deputies he could not leave unattended while he pursued a 3rd. "Arya," he said. "Go," she said. She was already moving toward the deputies, and her movement had the particular quality of someone who had made a rapid assessment of their own physical capacity and determined it was sufficient for the task. Her legs were still coming back from the cold and the binding, but she was upright, and her balance was recovered, and the look in her eyes was the look of a person who was done being the person in the bad situation, and was becoming the person who managed it. "You're not armed," he said. "They are," she said. "I'll take one, and you'll take the other before you go." She held his gaze. "Remove their weapons. Leave them with me. Go after your dog." He looked at her for 1 second. Then he moved to Tatum and disarmed him in 4 seconds. Weapon retention, backup piece from the ankle, the practiced efficiency of a man who had cleared subjects in the field and was working fast. He handed Arya the backup piece and moved to Cruz. Cruz tried to turn when he felt Ethan reach for his weapon. "Don't," Arya said. From behind him, with the specific, flat authority of someone holding a firearm, and meaning every syllable. Cruz stopped turning. Ethan cleared him in 3 seconds, tossed Cruz primary to a point 6 feet from either deputy. Then he looked at Arya. She had Tatum's backup piece in a two-handed grip, with a relaxed, practiced stance of someone who had fired weapons in considerably more complicated positions than this. Both deputies were in her field of vision, and she was managing the geometry without being told how. 25 minutes, he said. Back up in 25. I'll be here, she said. He ran. The service track was 80 yards of gravel and loose shell, and the reversing vehicle had made it to Route 7 and was now accelerating north. Ethan could hear it, the engine opening up, the sound of someone who had decided that speed was the only remaining option. He reached his vehicle and got in, and had it moving before the door fully closed. Rex was ahead of him on the road. The dog was running on the shoulder, not chasing the vehicle. The vehicle was already beyond run speed, but tracking it, following the tire trace and exhaust, and the specific compound signature of a person under adrenaline stress that Rex could apparently read in the air, disturbed by a departing vehicle. Ethan passed Rex at 30 miles an hour. The dog shifted immediately to the vehicle's path. The ingrained behavior of a canine who understood that when the partner's vehicle was moving in the direction of the target, the canine's job was to load or coordinate. And Rex would coordinate by maintaining the track independent of the vehicle, in case the vehicle's route and the target's route diverged. He got Ethan's field supervisor back on the direct channel. "This is Cole. I have a third subject, sergeant rank, Callaway Parish, name Holloway, fleeing north on Route 7 in a department vehicle. I need roadblocks, and I need the state police channel, not the parish channel. Do not use parish dispatch." "Copy, Cole. State police notified. What's your current position?" "Route 7, marker 43, pursuing. 2 subjects detained at the canal location. An FBI-friendly civilian is holding them. Get someone there first." "Copy." He pushed the vehicle to 70, on a road designed for 55, and the marshland moved past him on both sides in the dark. And the vehicle ahead, a Callaway Parish Sheriff's unit, was visible in the distance, its lights still dark, which told him Holloway was trying to move without radio signature, trying to get far enough ahead that the response coordination broke down before it could close around him. Holloway didn't know what Cole had called in. He didn't know the state police channel had been activated. He found out at Route 7 and Highway 308. The state police unit was already there. 1 vehicle, positioned across the intersection. Lights up, the specific configuration of a hard stop. Holloway saw it at 200 yards, and his brake lights came on, and Ethan watched from behind as the vehicle slowed, then stopped, sitting in the road between the state police unit ahead and Ethan's vehicle coming up from behind. Holloway sat in that stopped vehicle for 14 seconds. Ethan counted them. 14 seconds was a person running through options and arriving at the end of them. 14 seconds was someone who had built something over a long time, realizing that the building was coming down, and there was no version of the next 12 hours that looked anything like what the previous 12 months had looked like. The driver's door opened. Holloway got out with his hands up. He was in his 50s, heavier than his department photo suggested. He stood in the road between 2 vehicles with law enforcement markings, and his hands at shoulder height, and his face was doing something that Ethan, when he got out of his own vehicle with his weapon drawn, read as not defiance and not calculation, but something older and more complicated than either. He looked like a man who was exhausted. "Sergeant Holloway," Ethan said. "FBI. Turn and face your vehicle." Holloway turned. He put his hands on the roof of his cruiser without being told. He had done this part before. The mechanics of it were in his body, even if the experience of being on this side of it was new. "There's two others at the canal," Holloway said. His voice was flat and stripped down. "Tatum and Cruz." "I know," Ethan said. "They're detained." A pause. "The girl, the operative." "She's alive," Ethan said. "She's at the canal." Another pause, longer. "She was supposed to be—" He stopped, didn't finish. "Supposed to be dead," Ethan said. "In a canal in Callaway Parish. Logged as an accident by the same system that was supposed to prevent accidents." He kept his voice factual. He was still doing the job, and the job required accuracy, not anger, even when anger was the appropriate human response to the information. "She's alive, Sergeant, and she has 3 weeks of documentation on your operation." Holloway said nothing. The state police officer had approached from the 308 end and had the second angle covered. Ethan cuffed Holloway with the calm, practiced efficiency of someone for whom the physical motion was automatic and the cognitive space was available for other things. His phone buzzed. Aria. He almost missed the call. He hadn't realized she had his number. Then remembered she was a Navy SEAL who had been running an intelligence operation for 3 weeks and probably had his number from a source he wouldn't know to check. "2 problems," she said. "Tell me." "Tatum made a call before I got his phone. I don't know who he reached or what he said. I only saw the last 2 digits of the number." She paused. "And Cruz is talking." "Talking to you?" "Talking at me. He's been talking for 4 minutes. I think he's scared enough that he's trying to negotiate and too scared to be strategic about it." Her voice was even and precise. "He mentioned a name I didn't have, someone above Holloway." Ethan looked at Holloway's back, at the man he had just cuffed. Above Holloway. "He said the operation wasn't Holloway's design. He said Holloway ran the checkpoint logistics, but the route itself, the structure, the protection, the money, that originated with someone in the parish administration." She paused. "He said it's the parish sheriff." The marsh was very quiet around Route 7. Ethan processed that in the specific, rapid way that field agents process information that reorganizes the architecture of a situation. He thought about the dispatch call he had made when he first found the vehicle. The one that had gone to shared county dispatch. The one that had reached Tatum and Cruz and potentially Holloway. Shared county dispatch, which ran through the parish sheriff's office. "Your initial call," Aria said, "when you found me. If the sheriff's office is part of this, then my location was broadcast to the person running the operation before I had secured anything," Ethan said. "Yes," she said, "which means they've known for 40 minutes that the vehicle was found, that I was alive, that you were there." She paused. "If the sheriff decides to manage this at the county level before your federal backup arrives—" "He'll try to contain it," Ethan said. "Take over the scene. Reframe the narrative." "Can he do that?" "Not with a federal agent on scene and evidence in hand." Ethan looked at the drive that was in his jacket pocket. The waterproof casing. The 3 weeks of files. "Not with what Rex pulled from that car." He paused. "But he might try anyway. And trying, in this context, means arriving at that canal with additional assets and the authority of his office, and making things very difficult for 20 minutes while he figures out whether he can still control the story." 20 minutes, she said. "Your backup is—" 15 now, he said. "But Aria, the canal location. You have 2 detained deputies and a hypothermia recovery and a piece of evidence that connects everyone. If the sheriff arrives before my team—" "I'll be all right," she said. "I know you will," he said. "That's not what concerns me. What concerns me is the chain of custody on that drive. If he arrives and makes a jurisdictional claim on the evidence—" "He won't get it," she said. He paused. "Where is it?" Where it's been since you handed it to me, she said. Safe. He understood. She had placed it on her person, and her person had just survived a deliberate drowning attempt and was not inclined to surrender anything to anyone who arrived without federal credentials. I'm bringing Holloway back, he said. 12 minutes. Copy, she said. He walked Holloway to his vehicle and put him in the back, and looked at Rex, who had arrived at the state police stop at some point in the last 4 minutes, and was sitting on the shoulder, watching the proceedings with the patient, interested attention of a dog who was waiting to find out what the next part of the job was. Good work, Ethan said. Rex's tail moved twice. Ethan drove back toward the canal. He was 6 minutes out when his radio delivered the thing he had been calculating toward. A Callaway Parish Sheriff unit was en route to the canal location. 2 units. Called in, according to the dispatch log, by an unspecified report of an officer-involved incident requiring senior departmental response. Senior departmental response. The sheriff. He pushed the vehicle to 75. When he came down the service track, the scene had changed configuration. A third vehicle, an unmarked sedan with official plates, was parked at the edge of the canal. And there was a man standing 20 feet from Aria, and he had the specific physical quality of someone who was accustomed to being the most authoritative person in any room he entered, and was recalibrating to a situation where that assumption was being challenged. Aria was standing with her back to the canal water, and she had positioned herself, whether consciously or by trained instinct, between the man and the point on the bank where the vehicle had gone under. Tatum and Cruz were still where she had put them. Both of them were watching the man in the official sedan with the expression of people who had been waiting for a specific development and were not sure if this development was rescue or complication. Ethan got out. The man turned. He was 50-something, thick through the shoulders, wearing civilian clothes but with the bearing of someone who had been making institutional decisions for long enough that the bearing had become permanent. He had a badge on his belt. Parish Sheriff. The name came back from the background briefings Ethan had received when he was assigned to the Gulf Coast Division. Sheriff Dale Pressman. 12 years in office, unopposed in the last 3 elections. Agent Cole, Pressman said. He said it with the specific quality of a man who had been briefed on the situation and was managing his presentation carefully. I'm glad you're here. We've had a significant incident in my parish tonight, and I wanted to be on scene personally. Ethan looked at him, then at Aria. She met his eyes briefly, and then looked back at Pressman with the expression she had been wearing. Calm, direct, patient in the specific way of someone who has decided to let a situation develop to its natural conclusion rather than force it prematurely. Sheriff Pressman, Ethan said, this is a federal scene. I declared it about 40 minutes ago. I understand that, Pressman said, and I want to cooperate fully. I've been trying to reach you on the county channel since I got the incident report. The county channel. The compromise channel. The channel that ran through his office. I've been on the federal direct line, Ethan said. My backup is en route. Of course, Pressman said. He looked at Tatum and Cruz. These officers are detained pending federal investigation, Ethan said. Pressman's expression shifted slightly. Agent Cole, these are my officers. If there are allegations, there are more than allegations, Ethan said. There's a survivor, there's physical evidence, and there are now 3 detained personnel, including Sergeant Holloway. He held Pressman's gaze. Holloway is in my back seat. The name landed. Pressman looked at his car. Ethan watched his face do something fast and small, and then recover. The recovery was good. 12 years in office produced good recoveries. But Rex was watching Pressman. The dog had come to stand beside Ethan, and he had been watching the sheriff since Ethan got out of the vehicle, and his assessment had produced the specific, forward-loaded stillness that preceded his alert. Not the growl, not the warning, The alert. The thing that came when the evidence was present and confirmed, and what was needed now was the formal communication of what had been found. Ethan knew that alert. He trusted it completely. "Sheriff Pressman," he said, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to understand that the answer is being documented in real time by my field equipment." He held the man's gaze without blinking. "Did you have prior knowledge of the classified military investigation that Lieutenant Aria Morgan was conducting in Callaway Parish?" Silence. Pressman looked at him, at Aria, at Rex, at the canal. Then he looked at Ethan with the expression of someone who was running one final calculation. The calculation that very experienced people run when they are determining whether there is any version of the next sentence that helps them. The expression lasted 3 seconds, and then it went away, replaced by something empty and deliberate. "I want a lawyer," Pressman said. The canal was quiet. The marsh around it was quiet. The dark water where a patrol car was 3 feet underwater held its secrets, and the night held everything else. Then, from Route 7, the sound of vehicles. Multiple vehicles coming fast. Lights, blue and white, federal configuration. Ethan's backup. 13 minutes and 22 seconds after he had told Aria they'd be here in 15. Rex sat down. His tail moved once. The motion was small and complete, and entirely sufficient. And Dale Pressman, 12-year sheriff of Callaway Parish, 3-time unopposed incumbent, the man who had built a trafficking route through his own department's checkpoints and covered it with the machinery of his own authority, stood on a canal bank in the November night and watched the federal vehicles come down his service road and understood that the machinery had run out. Aria walked to Ethan's side. She was still wet, still showing the bruising that cold water and flex cuffs leave on a person who has been in both for 40 minutes. Her core temperature was still not what it should be, and wouldn't be for another hour. She stood straight. She always stood straight. "Cruz mentioned a name," she said quietly. "Above Pressman." Ethan looked at her. "Above the sheriff." "One name," she said. "He said it once and then stopped. Congressman." The federal vehicles came through the gate, and the case that had started as a radio malfunction in a dispatch log, the entry designed to disappear, the bureaucratic erasure of a deliberate drowning, became something that would not disappear for a very long time. Because the dog had gone back to the water, because the drive had come up, because a Navy SEAL who had been left to die refused to stop counting, and because a congressman's name, spoken once in fear by a man trying to negotiate his way out of a canal bank in Louisiana, had just become the first thread of something much larger than the 3-parish trafficking route. Rex looked at the federal vehicles arriving. Then he looked at Ethan. Then he looked at the canal. His nose moved. He was still reading it. He was not done. The federal team was 6 agents and a field supervisor named Carla Voss, who had been running Gulf Coast operations out of the New Orleans office for 9 years, and who processed the scene at the canal with the fast, comprehensive efficiency of someone who had built her entire career on arriving at situations that had already developed further than anyone wanted, and making them manageable anyway. She walked the bank in 4 minutes, looked at the detained deputies, looked at Holloway in the back of Ethan's vehicle, looked at Pressman, who had been placed against his own vehicle by 2 federal agents, and who was still saying nothing beyond the 2 words he had said when Ethan's question landed. She looked at Aria last. Aria, who was wrapped in a thermal blanket from the federal team's medical kit, and was sitting on the hood of Ethan's vehicle with the drive in her hand, had the expression of someone who had been through the worst of what the night could produce, and was now in the part that came after. which was the part that required a different kind of endurance. "Lieutenant Morgan," Voss said, "I need your account, full and sequential. Start from when you arrived in Callaway Parish 3 days ago." Arya looked at her. "I need to give you a name first." Voss paused. "What name?" "One of the detained deputies gave it under duress before I could fully document it. I don't want it lost in the chain of account." She held Voss's gaze. "Congressman Gerald Fitch, Louisiana's 4th District. He's the financial architecture above Pressman." Voss went very still. Ethan watched her process it. The fast internal recalibration of a senior agent receiving information that reorganized the scale of a case she had arrived at believing she understood. "You have documentation on Fitch?" Voss asked. "Not directly," Arya said. 3 weeks of documentation on the route, the checkpoint logistics, and the departmental personnel involved. Fitch's name came from crews verbally, but the financial flows in my files—" She looked at the drive. "The money wasn't staying in Callaway Parish. The amounts were too large for a parish-level operation. Someone was moving it up." She paused. "I didn't have the destination when they found me tonight. I was building toward it." "How close were you?" "One source away," Arya said. "A checkpoint worker named Raymond Tate, who has been running vehicle logs for 8 months without understanding what he was logging. He agreed to speak to me tonight. That's why I was on Route 12. She held Voss's gaze. "Tatum and Cruz intercepted me before I got to him." "Tate," Voss said. She looked at one of her agents. "Find Raymond Tate, Route 12 checkpoint, Callaway Parish, tonight, before anyone else does." The agent was on his phone before Voss finished the sentence. Ethan watched the machine of a properly resourced federal investigation activate around the canal bank. Agents processing the detained deputies. A forensic team being called for the vehicle recovery. A separate detail managing Pressman with a careful, practiced attention of agents who understood that a man with 12 years of institutional relationships was a flight risk of a specific kind. Not physical, but communicative, and who had removed his phone before he could make a call. Rex was still at the water. He had been at the water since the federal team arrived, moving along the bank with his nose working the surface, doing the slow, methodical reading of an animal that has identified a source and is still extracting from it. Ethan had let him work, because Rex at the water meant Rex was still finding things, and Ethan had learned not to interrupt findings. Voss appeared beside him. "Your dog," she said. "Still reading the vehicle," Ethan said. "What else is in there?" "I don't know," he said. He pulled the drive because it was the strongest signature and the most urgent because Arya told me it was there. But he's still reading something. She looked at the water. "We have divers coming. 90 minutes. He'll tell us what to look for when they get here," Ethan said. "He narrows the search pattern, makes the divers faster." Voss studied Rex for a moment. "I've worked with canine units for 9 years," she said. "I've never seen a dog pull evidence from a submerged vehicle." "He'd never done it before tonight," Ethan said. She looked at him. "And you sent him in anyway." "He told me he knew where it was," Ethan said. "I trusted him." Voss was quiet for a moment. Then she went back to the scene and left Ethan with his dog and the canal. He crouched beside Rex at the bank. "What else?" he said quietly. Rex looked at him, then at the water. His nose moved in the specific pattern it made when the signal was complex. Multiple sources, overlapping, requiring sorting. More than one thing in that vehicle. The drive was out. Arya's drive was in Voss's custody now, documented and logged and beyond anyone's reach. Whatever Rex was still reading was something else. Something they hadn't known to look for. Ethan sat on the bank beside his dog and waited. The twist came from the federal forensic team's initial communication at 11:47. It came through Voss's radio, and Ethan was close enough to hear it. The forensic tech, who had been running the preliminary data recovery from Arya's drive, working remotely with the encoded files she had unlocked with a 12-character passphrase that she had given Voss from memory, without hesitation. "Supervisor Voss, the financial records in Section 3 of the drive." The tech's voice had the specific quality of a professional delivering information that has exceeded the expected parameters. "The outbound transfers from the operations accounts, they're not going to a single destination. There are 3 recipient accounts. 2 are shell structures we can work through. The third..." A pause. "The third is a direct transfer account registered to a non-profit organization based in Washington." "Which organization?" Voss said. The tech said a name. Voss looked at Arya. Arya had heard it. She was looking at Voss with an expression that Ethan couldn't fully read. Not surprise, but the specific expression of someone who had been building toward a conclusion and has just received confirmation that the conclusion was worse than the working hypothesis. "You know it," Voss said. "It's Fitch's wife's foundation," Arya said. "Coastal Preservation Nonprofit. It's been operating for 7 years. She kept her voice level. "The money from a trafficking operation running through Louisiana checkpoints has been going directly into a nonprofit controlled by a congressman's family." She paused. "That's not just corruption. That's a federal RICO structure." Voss turned away and made a call that Ethan could not hear, and that lasted 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And when she came back, her face had the particular controlled quality of a senior agent who had just been on the phone with someone very senior and had received authorization that significantly expanded the scope of what she was authorized to do. "I need Cruz and Tatum separated," she said to her team. "Individual interviews. Full immunity offer on the table for the first one who gives me a complete account of Fitch's involvement." She looked at Arya. "Lieutenant Morgan, are you medically stable enough for a formal debrief tonight?" "Yes," Arya said. "You should be at a hospital." "I should be debriefed," Arya said. "The hospital can happen after." She met Voss's gaze with the patient, unmovable quality that was apparently her baseline. 3 weeks of operational intelligence is in my head as well as that drive. Some of it I didn't have time to document. You need both." Voss looked at her for 3 seconds. "All right," she said. "Medical assessment on scene first. If you clear it, we do the debrief in the vehicle." "Copy," Arya said. She looked at Ethan. He was back at the bank with Rex and hadn't heard the entire exchange. But she walked to where he was crouching and stood beside him, and he knew from her posture that something had shifted. "Fitch is confirmed," he said. "Financially confirmed," she said. "His wife's foundation has been receiving transfers." She looked at the water. The case just became a congressional corruption investigation. He processed that. "That's large," she said. "Yes." She crouched beside him and beside Rex. "Your dog is still working. He's reading something in the vehicle. More than one thing. I'm waiting for the divers." She looked at the canal, at the disturbed surface that marked the vehicle's location. She was quiet for a moment, the specific quiet of someone thinking through a 3-dimensional problem. "The vehicle they used to transport me," she said. "It wasn't Tatum and Cruz's regular unit. It was a different cruiser. I noticed it when they put me in. The unit number was different from the unit they arrived in at the checkpoint." She looked at Ethan. "I thought it was a secondary vehicle they used for this specific purpose. But if it's a different unit..." "It has a different history," Ethan said. "Different logs, different mileage, different locations it's been." She held his gaze. "If that vehicle has been used for this operation before tonight, the drive Rex is still reading could be showing him previous transport evidence," Ethan said. "Biological trace, material residue from previous uses." She was very still. Rex turned his head from the water and looked at both of them with the specific, communicative gaze of an animal who had been tracking a conversation it couldn't hear in words, but was reading in the biochemistry of the people having it. He stood up. He moved 3 steps to his left along the bank. Stopped. Looked at the water from the new angle. Then he made a sound Ethan had never heard before. Not the alert, not the warning, not the growl or the low note, or any of the 12 distinct sounds he had cataloged in 14 months of partnership. Something older and more urgent than any of them. A sound that came from the instinctive rather than the trained, from whatever part of the animal existed before the training built on top of it. "What is that?" Arya said. Ethan was already on his feet. "That's new," he said. And new from Rex meant something he had never found before. He got Voss. Voss came to the bank and looked at the dog. Rex was fixed on a point in the water 6 feet to the left of where the vehicle had submerged. A different location, a different angle, a part of the canal that the initial response had not focused on, because the vehicle was the obvious thing. And the vehicle was where attention had gone. "What's he reading?" Voss asked. "Not the vehicle," Ethan said. "Something else in the water, separate from the vehicle." Voss looked at the canal. She had the expression of a senior agent running a calculation she didn't want to complete. "How long has he been reading that specific location?" "He shifted to it in the last 10 minutes, Ethan said. "He was on the vehicle. Then he moved." A pause. "Get me the dive team's ETA," Voss said to an agent behind her. Her voice was flat and stripped of everything except necessity. 60 minutes, the agent said. "Get me 40, she said. She looked at Rex. Rex was still fixed on the water, his body now in the specific, squared configuration that Ethan had seen in training, when the recovery dog on the adjacent lane had found a different kind of evidence than what anyone had been looking for. Human remains. Rex had never found them in the field. He was not trained for that specific detection. But he was trained on the compounds that biological decomposition produced, because those compounds sometimes overlapped with evidence his training covered, and the training had been thorough. Ethan looked at Voss. "I think he's reading." "I know what he's reading," Voss said quietly. "How old? Can you tell?" Ethan looked at Rex, at the quality of his attention, at the way his nose was working the air versus the water, the specific pattern he made when the signal was clear and strong versus faint and degraded. "Not old," he said. "Recent, strong signal." He held Voss's gaze. "Very recent." Arya had come to stand beside them. She was looking at Rex, and her face had gone to the specific, controlled stillness that Ethan had learned meant she was absorbing something that she was going to process later, privately, in whatever space a person used for the things that were too large for public processing. "When they picked me up tonight," she said quietly, "they picked me up alone. I was alone on Route 12. She paused. "But Raymond Tate, the checkpoint worker who agreed to talk to me, he was supposed to meet me at 11, at the same location." She looked at Voss. "He was coming from the south end of Route 12. He would have passed the checkpoint run by Tatum and Cruz to get to me." The canal was very quiet. "They knew you were meeting someone," Voss said. "They knew I was building a source," Arya said. "They didn't know who. But if they found him on the road—" She stopped. Voss was already moving. "Find Tate," she said into her radio. "Now. All units. Route 12, South End. Now." Rex sat down at the water's edge and looked at the point in the canal that had been holding his attention. And the look on his face was the look of an animal who had found what was there and was waiting for the humans around him to catch up with what he already knew. Ethan put his hand on the dog's back. "Good boy," he said. Rex leaned into his hand. and the canal in Callaway Parish held its dark, cold November water and the things the water had been used to hide. And the federal team moved around its banks with the urgent, particular machinery of people who had arrived expecting one case and found another, larger one beneath it. Like something submerged, waiting to surface. Raymond Tate's body was recovered from the canal at 12:19 in the morning, 40 yards from where the patrol car had gone under. He had been placed in the water within the last 2 hours. He had not drowned. And the case that Cruz had built in 3 weeks of quiet, dangerous intelligence work, the case she had nearly died in the back of a patrol car to protect, became, in the moment the dive team surfaced and Voss made the call to Washington that activated a different and larger mechanism than any of them had started the night expecting to need: a federal murder investigation. Aria stood at the bank and looked at the water. Ethan stood beside her and said nothing, because there was nothing that needed to be said. Rex pressed against her leg. She put her hand on his back and held it there, and the three of them stood at the edge of what the night had become, and the marsh made its sounds around them. And somewhere in Washington, a congressman's phone was about to ring for the last normal time it would ever ring. Raymond Tate was 34 years old. He had worked the Route 12 checkpoint for 8 months because it was the only job available in Callaway Parish that paid enough to cover his mother's medication and his daughter's school fees simultaneously. He had not known what the vehicles he was logging were carrying. He had known something was wrong with the pattern. The specific vehicles, the specific drivers, the way certain license plates never went through the secondary inspection, while others were pulled for full searches. But knowing something is wrong and understanding what to do with that knowledge were different problems, and he had been trying to solve the second one when Aria Morgan found him. He had agreed to talk to her. He had been killed for agreeing. Ethan sat with that information in the specific way he sat with things that were too large for his immediate cognitive space. Not pushing it away, not performing a response to it, just holding it present while the work continued. Because the work had to continue. That was the only thing that honored what Raymond Tate had agreed to do. The federal operation at the canal ran through the night without stopping. By 2 in the morning, Cruz had taken the immunity offer. He gave a full account in 38 minutes. Everything from the route structure to Pressman's coordination role to the 2 times he had seen Fitch personally at a private meeting in Baton Rouge where the financial arrangement was discussed and confirmed. He gave dates. He gave locations. He gave the name of the attorney who had been present at both Baton Rouge meetings and who served as the legal architecture between Fitch's foundation and the trafficking money. Tatum held out until 3:15, and then didn't. Because by 3:15, Cruz's account had been cross-referenced against Aria's documentation, and the federal team had confirmed enough overlap that the immunity window for a second cooperating witness was about to close. And Tatum could do the math on what came after that window closed. His account took 22 minutes. It confirmed everything Cruz had said and added 2 things. The first was a storage location, an abandoned processing facility 12 miles west of the checkpoint, used as a staging point for the route's human cargo before transport. The second was a federal corrections officer in Baton Rouge named Simmons, who had been providing transport documentation that made trafficking victims look like authorized prison transfers on paper. Boss made 6 calls between 2 and 4 in the morning, each one to a different level of the federal hierarchy, each one activating a different operational component of a machinery that had been built for exactly this kind of multi-jurisdictional, multi-layer corruption case. At 4:17, federal agents executed a search warrant on the storage facility west of the checkpoint. Ethan heard about it through Voss's radio while he was sitting in his vehicle with Rex, both of them in the specific, suspended state of people who have been operational for 7 hours and are past the adrenaline and into something more durable and less comfortable. The radio said, 14 individuals recovered, alive. Medical assistance requested. Ethan closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Then he opened them and looked at Rex. The dog was looking back at him with those dark, steady eyes, and his expression was the expression it always was. Present, direct, complete, not performing anything. Just there. 14, Ethan said. Rex's tail moved twice. Arya was in the back of a federal vehicle, receiving a medical assessment that she had agreed to only after the debrief was finished, which had taken 2 hours and 40 minutes and had produced 47 pages of documented intelligence that Voss's team would spend the next 3 days cross-referencing. She had answered every question with the specific, unhurried precision of someone who had organized the information in her head during 3 weeks of fieldwork and was now accessing it in perfect sequential order. The medical assessment showed 2 cracked ribs from the impact against the cruiser seat when they had pushed the vehicle into the canal, a significant contusion on her left shoulder, early-stage hypothermia that had been addressed by the thermal protocol, and the bruising around her wrists from the flex cuffs that would take 2 weeks to fully resolve. The EMT who assessed her said, "You should have been unconscious from the hypothermia alone." Arya said, "I had things to do." The EMT looked at her for a moment and wrote something in his assessment notes that did not appear in the standard medical fields. Ethan came to the vehicle when the assessment was finished. Arya was sitting with a second thermal blanket and a cup of coffee that someone had produced from a federal kit and that she was holding with both hands in the specific way of a person relearning their own body temperature. She looked at him when he opened the door. 14, he said. She nodded. She had already heard. Her face did something that was private and brief, the specific expression of someone receiving confirmation of the thing they had been building toward for 3 weeks, filtered through the specific experience of the night they had almost not survived to hear it. Tate knew, she said. He told me in our first contact that there were transfers happening at the checkpoint that didn't match the official logs. He was keeping his own records. She looked at her coffee. He was 34 years old, and he was keeping his own records on a trafficking operation because he didn't know who to give them to, and he was too scared to stop looking. She paused. He found me. I didn't find him. He reached out through 3 layers of contact because he needed someone to give the records to, and he had decided I was the right someone. He was right, Ethan said. He's dead, she said. He's dead, and 14 people are alive because of what he kept and what you built around it. He held her gaze. Both of those things are true. She held the coffee. Yes, she said. Both things are true. The twist came at 6:40 in the morning. It came through Voss, who came to find Ethan at his vehicle, with the expression she had developed over the last 6 hours for delivering information that required recalibration. Fitch, she said. His office was contacted 40 minutes ago by the Justice Department. And? He's cooperating, she said. Ethan stared at her. He requested a meeting with the AG's office. His attorney called at 6:02. Full cooperation in exchange for a negotiated arrangement. She paused. He's been cooperating since 6:15. With what? That's the part, she said. He's not the top of this. He's the 4th District conduit. The financial architecture above him, the organization that approached him 18 months ago, with an arrangement that he accepted because the money was significant and the protection seemed solid. It runs across 4 states and connects to a Port Authority smuggling operation that has been active for 6 years. She held Ethan's gaze. Fitch wasn't running this. He was being paid to provide cover. He agreed to give us the people who were paying him. Ethan processed that. Which means this case, just became a multi-state organized crime investigation with congressional connections, Voss said. Yes. She looked toward the canal. What started as a radio malfunction in a dispatch log is now one of the largest corruption cases this division has worked in 8 years. He thought about the dispatch entry. Radio malfunction. Possible unit en route. No follow-up required. 3 lines designed to disappear. The institutional erasure of a deliberate murder attempt. Rex had pulled him out of the car at mile marker 42. Rex had read the water before Ethan could read anything. The drive, Ethan said. Aria's drive. The financial documentation. Is already in the chain of evidence, Voss said. It's the foundation of the Fitch prosecution. Without it, his cooperation has no corroboration. With it, his account is verifiable against documentation he didn't know existed. She paused. Without that drive, this case has Tatum and Cruz and a county sheriff and a sergeant. With it, it has a congressman, a 6-year multi-state operation, and names that haven't surfaced yet. She looked at the canal. And your dog pulled it from 3 feet of black water. He knew it was there before I did, Ethan said. He knew it was there before anyone did, she said. And he knew Tate was in the water before any of us had looked for him. She was quiet for a moment. The dive team lead told me this morning that without the canine indication, they would have focused entirely on the vehicle. Standard protocol. Tate's body would have drifted to a different section of the canal by morning, and the connection between his death and the patrol car might have taken days to establish. She held his gaze. Days in which the evidence trail cools. Days in which cooperating witnesses have time to reconsider. Days in which attorneys build walls. A pause. Your dog is the reason this case is intact this morning. Ethan looked at Rex. Rex was asleep in the back seat of the vehicle. He had been asleep for 20 minutes, in the deep, immediate sleep of a working dog who had run long and hard, and was now in the safe space of the vehicle with his partner nearby, and was doing what bodies did when the work was done. His tan and gold and black coat rose and fell with his breathing, and his face was peaceful in the specific, uncomplicated way that sleeping dogs' faces are peaceful. Without the management of expression that humans maintain even in sleep, just the pure, unguarded presence of an animal at rest. The months that followed were not dramatic in the way that the night at the canal had been dramatic. They were the different kind, the long, grinding, institutional drama of federal prosecution, of grand juries and depositions and plea negotiations, and the slow, incremental dismantling of a structure that had taken 6 years to build. Fitch entered a cooperation agreement and spent 47 days in depositions that produced 912 pages of documented testimony. The attorney who had been present at the Baton Rouge meetings was disbarred and charged. The Port Authority Connection, the organization above Fitch, was identified as a network with assets in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida that had been moving people and money through port infrastructure for 6 years, using the specific mechanism of corrupt officials at multiple levels who provided cover in exchange for a share that grew with the scale. 31 people were charged across 4 states. 17 entered guilty pleas. 14 went to trial. 12 were convicted. Sheriff Dale Pressman received 22 years. He sat in the courtroom during sentencing with the same controlled, empty expression he had worn on the canal bank in November, and the judge read the sentence with the specific, deliberate pace that federal judges use when they want the weight of each word to arrive separately. Holloway received 16 years. He had provided some cooperation, but not full cooperation. The halfway position that produces a reduced sentence without the genuine reduction of full cooperation. And he sat in the same courtroom 4 days after Pressman, with an expression that was less empty and more the look of a man who had calculated wrong at multiple decision points over the preceding 2 years, and was now living in the results. Tatum and Cruz, who had cooperated fully, received 7 years each. The kind of outcome that looks lenient, until you understand that the 7 years purchased the evidence that produced the 31 charges and the 12 convictions, and the dismantling of 6 years of organized crime. The corrections officer Simmons received 11 years. Gerald Fitch, 4-term congressman from Louisiana's 4th District, entered a guilty plea under his cooperation agreement and was sentenced to 9 years with an additional 5 of supervised release. He resigned from his seat 3 days after the indictment, and the seat went to a special election, won by a woman from Lafayette, who had spent 12 years working in victim advocacy. 14 trafficking victims recovered from the storage facility west of the Route 12 checkpoint were connected with resources through a federal victim services program that Voss's office had been building relationships with for years. 12 of them were from outside the United States. 2 were from Callaway Parish itself, local women who had been in the facility's system for 3 and 4 months respectively, whose disappearances had been reported to the same department that had been running the operation. Their cases had been filed and deprioritized. They were found because Rex had been at the bank when Tatum's account produced the storage location address. They were found because everything that had been set in motion by a dog who refused to accept a radio malfunction entry had continued moving. Aria returned to active duty in February. She had been medically cleared in 6 weeks, which was faster than the Navy's timeline suggested, and exactly as fast as she had told the medical board she would be. She visited the FBI Gulf Coast field office on the Tuesday before she shipped out. She brought nothing. She came in her civilian clothes, not performance, just the natural way of someone who was present as herself rather than as her rank. She found Ethan in the office's back lot, running Rex through a standard assessment course, the daily calibration that kept the partnership current and sharp. She watched them for 5 minutes without announcing herself. She watched the dog move through the course with the fluid, precise efficiency of 4 years of training and 14 months of field work, and every specific thing that the partnership between them had built into his responses over those months. She watched Ethan at the end of the course receive the dog's return, hands on both sides of Rex's face, the specific contact of a partnership that had been through things that bonded it permanently. She walked over when they finished. Rex looked up at her before she said anything. His ears went forward. His tail moved. Not the twice of confirmation, not the once of acknowledgement, but the full, continuous movement of a dog who recognized someone he had decided to remember. She crouched down. She put her hands on his face the way you put your hands on the face of something that saved your life when you were bound to a seat in rising water, with no exit visible, and a government that had logged your death as a radio malfunction. "Hey," she said. Rex pressed his nose against her cheek. She stayed there for a moment. Her eyes were closed, and her expression was the private, unmanaged expression she kept for things she wasn't performing. Then she opened her eyes and looked at the dog and said what she had been building toward since November. "You didn't just find me," she said softly. "You found all of them." Rex looked at her with those dark, honest eyes. 14 people, she said. Raymond Tate's records. Everything the canal was hiding. She scratched gently behind his ear. "You found it all." She stood. She looked at Ethan. "How is he?" she asked. "Same as always," Ethan said. "Better than me at everything that matters." She almost smiled. "That tracks." She held his gaze for a moment. "You're being offered a field supervisor position in the New Orleans office. I know because Voss mentioned it to my agency contact, and my agency contact mentioned it to me." "She mentioned it to me too," he said. Last week. Are you taking it? He looked at Rex. Not yet, he said. We have work to do here. She looked at the dog, at the partnership that was standing in a back lot in Gulf Coast, Louisiana, doing ordinary assessment work on an ordinary Tuesday morning, which was all it had ever been. Ordinary work, done with extraordinary attention, on an ordinary road, on an ordinary night, that had turned into something that would not be ordinary for a very long time. Good, she said. She reached out and shook Ethan's hand, clean and direct and without ceremony, the same way she did everything. Then she looked at Rex one more time. Rex sat down. His tail was still. His eyes were on her with the complete, steady, unambiguous attention that he gave to the things he carried in the particular category reserved for events that had mattered absolutely. She nodded at him once. He nodded back. The dog version, the slow, deliberate lowering and raising of the head that working dogs make when the communication is real and the acknowledgement is mutual. She walked to her vehicle. Ethan watched her go. Rex watched her go. When the vehicle turned out of the lot, Rex looked at Ethan with the expression he made when one phase of a thing had concluded and the next phase was available. Yeah, Ethan said. Back to work. He set the course again. Rex ran it. And in Callaway Parish, Louisiana, the Route 12 checkpoint operated under new management with federal oversight protocols that had been imposed as part of the prosecution agreement and that would run for 5 years minimum. The canal off Route 7 ran dark and fast with November water every year. And every year the water held nothing it shouldn't hold, because the system that had used it to dispose of inconvenient truths had been dismantled down to its financial roots. Raymond Tate's daughter was 8 years old. She went to school in Callaway Parish on a federal victim services scholarship that had been established as part of the prosecution's community restoration requirement. She was in 3rd grade. She liked math. 14 people recovered from a storage facility in November were alive and building whatever came after. And somewhere in the machinery of all of it, in the depositions and the verdicts and the survivor services and the daughter in 3rd grade who liked math, there was a moment at a canal bank in November where a dog had refused to accept what everyone else had already filed away, had pressed his nose to the water's surface, had gone in without being told it was possible, and had come back up with the truth in his mouth. Justice does not always arrive with sirens and authority and the machinery of institutions doing what they were built to do. Sometimes it arrives on 4 paws at mile marker 42 on a cold November night, reading a canal that everyone else had already logged as a malfunction and moved past. And it does not move past. It never moves past. Because that is what loyalty is, the refusal to accept the world's convenience at the expense of the truth it is trying to bury. Rex knew that from the first second at the water. He had always known it. And the world was different because he did.